Our GMC Sierra tweet of the night from Alex Kozora, Steelers Depot. He does a good job following a lot of the tape. And he says this: the Steelers didn't send a single five-man pressure against Tom Brady in yesterday's win. They had sent at least one such rush in their last 95 regular season games. The last time they didn't was 2016. The opponent, Tom Brady and the Patriots. Pittsburgh had a great game plan, and I will second that, Chris. For whatever reason, they were really good in the trenches yesterday against the Tampa offensive line. They slowed their run game down, which I didn't. I thought if there was going to be a breakout game for Tampa on the run, it would be this game, considering how the Steelers have still had trouble with it, and yet they shut it down.
Well, yeah, Tampa's the worst running team in the league, I think, by yards per carry average. So this was the the movable object meets the resistible force here, and the Steelers won that battle. I'll give Tomlin a lot of credit. I think with all those guys missing from his secondary, Edmonds the only regular starter who played, and like I said, a no-name. You know what, Josh Jackson, like you mentioned, 16 Island, Donnie Football called him today on the show. Tomlin had to come up with some good schemes, and he did. I will say this, though. When you decide you're only going to rush 4 against Brady, I mean, that's always been the tried and true way to beat him. It's just a lot easier said than done. In that particular instance, I give way more credit to the guys up front on the defensive line for winning the one-on-one battles the way that they did and doing what they were able to do as 4 men. Like, I think at some point the scheme goes out the window, stunts and twists and whatever, and it's just you winning one-on-one matchups. I'll quickly say this too, Bob. I think Byron Leftwich should be a head coach sooner rather than later, and I love him as an offensive mind. I don't know what Tampa Bay was doing, not just not throwing to Mike Evans, but not throwing on first down like they should have been. They are one of the best teams in the league when they throw on first down. They are the dead last worst team in the league when they run on first down. They did way too much of the latter and not enough of the former to play into the Steelers' hands.
Yeah, I agree with that. There are too many mismatches that were available to them in the past game secondary of the Steelers, and they just bypassed it. Maybe they thought they can get well in the run game against this team. Whatever the case, it did not work. Give the Steelers a lot of credit. All right, here's the question now moving forward. Kenny Pickett, I do not expect him to play this week. I think most of us agree now. The NFL and its optics and the fact they're taking this seriously, they've readjusted some of their protocols. You're going to have to wait at least a week to play. We saw that with Tua Tagovailoa, who will now play this week, even though he was cleared last week on Friday. Could have played. They didn't play him. So if he doesn't play and Mitch Trubisky plays well, and I'm talking about he's the reason they win, how do you go away from Mitch Trubisky at that point with one more game left before a bye?
You don't. You go with Mitch Trubisky against the Eagles. They'll be going when they play the Dolphins, Bob, against the one team that's actually done something like this. When Flores was the head coach, he kind of jerked around Tua a little bit. He put Fitzpatrick back in. You don't completely ruin a guy who's young if you go in and out there. It's not the ideal way to do it, to flip-flop your starting quarterback like that, but listen, I would have a different answer to you on this one if the Cincinnati Bengals had drubbed the Steelers in week 1. They were 5-1 and running away from the rest of the division. The fact remains, whether you are or are not a rebuilding team is at least partly a function of what is everybody in your division doing. They got a couple of 3-3 teams ahead of them. They've already beaten one of them, and they don't see the other one until late in the year. The Steelers have to try and continue to stay in this race. That's why if Trubisky brings the goods on Sunday night, they can't go away from him in Philadelphia. They've got to try to keep riding the hot hand.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you know, you can always go back to Pickett at some point. You know, it depends on how he plays. Again, if they win the game and he's not all that good, if we've seen some of the, then I think you do go back to Kenny Pickett because they've established him as the guy moving forward. But they're trying to, it's that tough situation they're in. They're trying to win games. They've never de-emphasized that in favor of a rebuild. But at the same time, you want to get your franchise quarterback to be the guy you drafted, that opportunity. So it's kind of a tough thing to do. Let's go to the phones here, Chris, real quick. We got Bob in McKees Rocks. What's up, Bob? How you doing?
What you talked about on Nightly Sports Call Sunday night, on the Sunday show. You mentioned it, about the baseball playoffs being exciting and about the fact that Cherington refused to raise the payroll. I've been following the Pirates since the early 50s, and right now he's made that team totally irrelevant. They're not going to be relevant until he's out of Pittsburgh.
Well, if you're going to talk about Cherington, you'd have to talk about the man in charge, and that's Bob Nutting. I mean, no matter who's in charge, ultimately he will be the guy who's deciding what to do with money. And I think the fact that Ben Cherington, and geez, I hate to get off this topic here, but we'll do it. Jason Mackey and Jeff Hathorn both had a chance to be in that press conference with him. And he made it sound like there's not any urgency to spend money at all. And I will then say, well, what about your guys at first base? You don't have anyone, your pitchers. You need help, even if you're rebuilding. You need people to come in here. Why not try to enhance the winning part of this culture and move it forward a little bit by bringing in some guys and spend some money? I don't see any reason why they can't do that even in a rebuild.
Yeah, I just, this idea that you've got to strip mine the whole thing down to absolutely nothing and all. I mean, well, there's the other part of this. There are teams that are clearly not trying to win. They're trying to accumulate as much young, controllable talent as possible. I do believe the Pirates, despite what they say, are still in that mode for at least one more year. But, yeah, I'm with people who just say at some point, like, give us something. You know, like, give us a guy who comes in and maybe is flipped. I mean, that's the other argument. If you're trying to acquire talent, pay a little money to somebody. This has been said for years. Pay a little bit of money to somebody on a one-year deal who you think might perform well enough to be a valuable trade chip at the deadline. It is tough to get mad at Pirates fans who are just screaming to the heavens saying, can you please extend some sort of an olive branch to us to give us a reason to come to the ballpark? You saw some of those crowds very late in the season. I mean, those were abysmal, Bob. I mean, I understand that the TV money and everything else makes this a profitable enterprise. Appreciation makes it a profitable thing year after year, revenue sharing. But when you have 2,000 people at most, and it seems and it looks like less in the park, that is really bad on a number of levels.
It really is. And you need to start pushing that forward a little bit while doing what you do with accumulating talent. There's nothing to say you can't do a little bit of both. Let's go to Stiz in Pittsburgh. Is that right, Stiz?
What's up, brother? Hey, I was watching tonight, and I first and foremost, kudos to the no-names in that secondary because they showed up and did their job. Mm-hmm. But let's not act like, the Tampa team got their stuff together. They're extremely talented, but Tom Brady looks like he's going through some things, and it showed.
Oh, there's no question it shows. I mean, I think anytime you go through something like he's going through, for all we know, he got a call the morning of the game from Giselle's lawyer, and maybe he heard something he didn't want to hear. Then he goes to that wedding, and that's, in and of itself, I don't have a problem with that because people have a life, even on here, for example, the Steelers had a fashion show. I was there; those guys all showed up. I mean, it's not like they're just going into a football, steam room, and that's all you got. Just all hit by football. They have a life. That's okay. But it's the fact that he went to Kraft's wedding and flew back on his own and missed, Saturday walkthrough. And it's also a continuation, Chris, of what he's done all of this season, which is, hey, I'm Tom Brady. I'm going to go away for 2 weeks. I'll be back when I'm ready. You're going to have to deal with that. Hey, I'll miss Wednesday practice. I got stuff I got to take care of. When you start doing that, then, instead of him yelling at offensive linemen should have been yelling at him.
If we're going to start ripping quarterbacks who are going to be in the Hall of Fame for not practicing on Wednesday, we might want to watch our stones here in our little glass house. It's more that Tom Brady has established himself as the ultimate gym rat, and now he's not behaving like one. I think he disrespected the Steelers, specifically Mike Tomlin, and figured in his head, I've beaten these guys. I've made it look so easy. I have Tomlin's number even in his building at home. I'm going to do the same thing I almost always do. Come in here, put up numbers, and humiliate these guys who have a skeleton crew in their secondary. And again, I'll go back to this. To Mike Tomlin and his team and his coaching staff's enormous credit, that didn't happen. However, one note of caution, because Pony was ready to gleefully put Tom Brady's career in a body bag after this game. I wouldn't do it yet, because I think he might have one more run up his sleeve.
Yeah, a few years ago, people did it all over the place, and they were completely wrong. And I would never doubt the guy. I'm not saying that. But clearly his mind is in a lot of places right now, and that's not good if you're the quarterback of a team that needs some wins and you're not going to be partaking in certain things based on how your personal life is going. And I think that's a tough thing, and I understand why they give him the leeway to do it, but it can't be good. And you're right. I think they probably took this game very lightly. It's human nature to do it when you look at all the injuries. So it was what it was, and the Steelers took advantage of it. Now they're 2-4. I think I saw, Chris, 22 of the 32 teams are either 500 or below 500. So that's interesting. We got to take a break. We'll be back with more right here on Pittsburgh CW and 93.7 The Fan. Thanks for joining us on this Monday night.